So then, we are back with more understanding from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end per Yirmiyahu the prophet. We find in a very interesting layer of the time of the end related with restoration. Very interestingly, there are many areas of leadership regarding then Daniel the politician, not Daniel the prophet. There is a great deal of confusion of every time a person is reading Daniel, they think he was related with only prophecy as a prophet. But those prophecies were related with a Gentile level from a politician's viewpoint. Very important. So then, when we read Daniel the 2nd chapter, where you find the statue, you find then the politician Daniel explaining the head of gold, the king of Babylon. Then you find the Middle Persians. Then you find then the Greco country, and then the Roman Empire, and then the base with the clay and iron. Then from those chapters after the 2nd, you have to understand that there is a section of it related then with the explanation of those kingdoms. Then afterwards you find then the time of restoration, and then the autumn feast. So then, let's give an example. When you're explaining then the 2nd chapter, then comes the explanation afterwards. For instance, this 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. However, when it comes a point where then the base of the statue, when it's layered with the 2nd chapter, then is a time of restoration. Time of restoration and reduction. So then, instantly, when you layer the 2nd chapter with the 12th, not only the 12th, because the 12th chapter gives you the understanding of the time of the ending of the time of the seat. 1,000 years of the seat. As we understand, when the Messiah was born, 4999 was then his kingdom, 1,000 years. Ended in 1009 with the destruction of Jerusalem and the Holy Tomb. Then there was no more tabernacling. Thus then the term New World Order. So the nations had to unite themselves to make sure that at least they make sense out of it. But then has ended in 2009, the 1,000 years of Nahashatan, as you read it in Galah or Revelation, the 20th chapter. So it's becoming easier to get these delineated, the first 1,000 and then the other 1,000. And then when you layer then these ending of the 1,000 years with the height of knowledge, and knowledge would increase, then we find the dragon's period of time. Devil is gone. There is no more devil. What was the main factor of being, involved with the devil in the past? Was to get your lies through, isn't it? We are no longer during the time of worship of devil. It's no longer the period of devil. We are in the period of the dragon. So then, when you layer the 2nd chapter with the 12th as then the starting point and the ending point, comes a time of the restoration period. Chapter 11 states areas of the restoration period. How nations, then portrayed as kingdoms, would react with each other. But when you read, for instance, the king of Persia, you are not reading a geographical area. You are reading a reference of mapping. So then Daniel the politician was explaining those areas, countries, for instance, or kingdoms, for instance, of Persia, and then the subsequent kingdoms of north and south. Those were only used as a reference of regions where he was at. So you are receiving an understanding of the time of restoration, obviously, because it's lined up with what the Messiah said and also Yirmiyahu. But then not only this, you find those kingdoms of the north, kingdom of the south, kingdom of the north, kingdom of the south. You find also then the sons of the east. So then you begin to understand where the Creator is coming from through His holy instructions. So when you read Daniel, the 11th chapter, you are reading time of restoration from the viewpoint of the Daniel the politician, not Daniel the prophet. You can only use prophet when you are speaking of tabernacling. Is he speaking of tabernacling? No, he's speaking of kingdoms of the world. So you understand Daniel as the politician. So when he was said then the kingdom of Persia, the location. He speaks of a location. Those are regional areas where the movements of the kingdoms of the time of the restoration period prior of the starting of the autumn feast or the sounding of the shofar. Indicating then obviously the relationship with those kingdoms of the time of the end. If you want an example, we can get these delineated so then people understand what he was talking about. So then, Daniel explains then obviously the second chapter relates with the entire Gentile level. Daniel as the politician, how the kingdoms of the world would act during this time. So then, Daniel starts, second chapter, then we find the head of gold, king of Babylon. Then the Medo and the Persians, and then you read obviously those are the silver. Then the center of the body you find then bronze. Then you find legs. Bronze obviously was then the Greco country. Then the legs of iron, then you find Rome. And then the base of the statue as iron with clay. So then the situation is we have to explain how the kingdoms of the world are going to act as a Gentile level via Daniel the politician, not prophet. So then, based on what Daniel has explained, then we find the second chapter, then you find the third chapter, then you find then the fourth chapter, and the fifth, and the sixth. Then when you come to the seventh chapter, and then the ninth verse, and he was observing until the thrones were set up, and the Ancient of Days set. So then he is giving us the prelude of then the time of the coming of the autumn feast. Then you have to layer this understanding with Galad, the 20th chapter. But then when it ends, this understanding, then the whole portion of the statue then ends. Explanation ends. Then the rest of it comes, the explanation of the base of the statue. How do we know this? Well, you understand, second chapter is the statue itself. Head of gold. Then you find the Middle Persians, then silver. Then you find the bronze, Greco country. You'll find Rome. And then you find iron and clay. Okay, iron and clay. What does it mean, iron and clay? Some nations would be strong, some nations would be weak, but then what? We have to delineate what they should be doing, should we not? Daniel the prophet, at the moment of the end, explained, but then we have to reverse it from the end. How do you reverse it? First we understand the system of the East. We are during the time of the period of the dragon, no longer devil. Devil does not exist anymore. It's a facet of him that is not usable for our time and season. This time is a time of precision, time of the dragon. Later becomes then the destroyer. So after the first sounding of the shofar, and then when you understand when the pit then is open, meaning when the atomic blasts then takes place, comes out then the destroyer. Then is changed from dragon to destroyer. That's why when you read Galad, the 20th chapter, then you understand those many names, devil, or then deceiver, and then you read destroyer, you read serpent, you read Nahashatan or Satan. Each of those are related with a specific time. But we have a tendency to mix those up because we were given scandalized scripture. So when we read then until the 7th chapter, for instance, and then comes the Ancient of Days, you understand they are preparing for judgment. What is the judgment? The sound of the shofar, isn't it? Autumn feast. So then we have to explain then the rest of it, because after this section then ends the whole as tabernacling. But then we have to explain the base of the statue, how nations would act amongst themselves as then the base where iron does not mix with clay. Thus what you have then the rest of it. But then you are not going to read areas related with 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and the sections of 7th. There are references made of those. But what you want is understand the restoration period. The restoration period gives you the movements of kingdoms of iron and clay, while tabernacling is being restored. Then you find, for instance, 11th chapter then states, and Daniel saw in the first year of Darius the Mede, standing and so on and so forth. But then the 5th chapter, and the king of the south shall be strong. This explanation of the 11th chapter is not related with Persia. It's related with the region where he was at. So then we have to make a study of those areas where those regions then they have a similitude map-wise, so then we can understand iron does not mix with clay. For some people it's a brain racking because they were taught scandalized scripture. They can understand how to layer those together. But they are layered together. So when you read the 2nd chapter, you have the entire statue, then you have the explanation of the subsequent chapters, and then you find the Ancient of Days in the 7th chapter, then you have a gap from the 7th into the 12th. So then you find a few references of the previous, but your main objective is what? Understanding the base of the statue, iron and clay. That's where we are at. So then, the kingdom of the north, we understand, those are the Soviets. The kingdom of the south is Africa. The sons of the east, those are the Chinese and the Asian countries. The west, they have no say in any of it. So the only kingdoms truly speaking out loud would be then obviously China, Soviet Union, and Africa. Only these. Because then the relationship of the time of the iron and clay nations, they are delineated. The West is not part of it. Because they have other titles given, and those are related with spiritual understanding, but not relation with kingdoms. You know, the first beast, the second beast. Those have relation with the West. But they are not regarded as West, they are regarded as the beast. You have to understand what it means, and the false prophet. With those you understand the West, or the representative of these false Messiah, or then false prophet. That's the West, but it's not mentioned. What it does mention is north, south, and then the sons of the rising sun, the east. So as we understand, then the Soviet Union, they are in charge of the BRIC, plus South Africa. As it was then, we did understand this very morning. The finance administration of South Africa, they are already working through mining, energy, neutral banking amongst themselves. They have then IMF on their side. So I begin to understand what it means. As you read the instructions and you read then the politician, then you begin to understand. Because this layer of the statue, of the base of it, related with iron, related with clay, you have to line up, or you have to layer with Yishmealites the prophet, Yishmealites the 61st chapter, and the returning of the holy cities laid waste for many centuries. But then those are related with tabernacling. The Messiah then, when he went up on the Mount Gerizim, he gave them 2 Yom creation days. He was born in 4999. He was placed on a pole 5032. We can safely say he spent time with the Samaritans 5032. Because after he left the Samaritans, he went to Jerusalem and he was destroyed. He was placed on a pole. Thus indicating Israel was cursed. No relation with Israel anymore. That's why Israel is going to be left for the very end. Then you begin to understand the relationship of the Messiah as tabernacling. Daniel did state it as a prophet, related with tabernacling when the rock would come and destroy the statue. Prior of this time, we are speaking of kingdoms of the time of the restoration period, prior of the starting of the autumn feast. So then positively there is then BRIC, and at this year then the Soviet Union, they are in charge of it, where then you have Brazil, you have Soviet Union, you have then India, you have China, and also South Africa. So what's on the agenda for the moment? As far as we understand, religion-wise related with, there is any relevance with it? Yes, it does. As far as trade-wise, we have to verify what's in the Soviets' agenda. They are in charge of the G20. Brazil is not relevant. India is not relevant, though they are part of it. China comes with a system. In Africa yet is birthing their southern kingdom. Has barely started. The West has no say in any of it. Europe has no say in any of it. Europe is absolutely entangled with Europe. Europe became an abomination as far as we understand the holy prophecies, because they tried to unite themselves as a Babylonian kingdom of themselves, must be destroyed. Thus they tried to come together and adhere to each other, but they would not. And then the separation of the United Kingdom. Because the system of the East is coming. And then nations, they are going to be independent. Thus we understand the 70 languages, a Creator decided, then those remain as it was. You know, United Kingdom, they are going to be divided not because there are some strange force separate them, it's because a normal factor of the system of the East. Any imbalance in a subsystem related, those who are clay mixed with iron, they are going to let the responsibilities for the iron to do the job of the clay, and they are not going to do otherwise. If you are part of a subsystem where you regard yourself as iron, but then you have a relationship with clay, government-wise, where you have unethical countries mixed up with your subsystem, when the system of the East comes, they are not going to pay the dues. They're going to invest their money because the system is confidential. Nobody can read this system because it's property of the Chinese government. You can be part of it, but you can only do as much as what you tracking. That's where the nations then they get caught. They are not tracking. And the Messiah said, give to the government what belongs to the government. Give God what belongs to God. What did the Messiah was trying to say? Give to the government. You have to have a tracking of it. It was an order, it was not optional. Give to the government means tracking. You have to give. But they are not tracking. So when the system comes, the nations are going to be obviously divided. Not because there is a special force destroying United Kingdom. Of course not. It's because they have weak links in their subsystem. They won't give a damn if they are owing their money. They're going to invest their fundings in the system. It's always productive, always profitable. And since they are part of a subsystem, well, what the heck, let the other nations over there with much money take care of the problem. And the West simply shut up. They are not part of it. Yeah, it's because of your interpretation. What interpretation? What don't we understand as far as the iron and clay is concerned? We read the 2nd chapter, you have the whole statute. The rest until the 7th gives you then the outline of the relationship of those nations other than the iron and clay. Then you find the Ancient of Days preparing for judgment, speaking of the autumn feast. The rest of it makes references of those kingdoms yet. However, the main objective is the time of restoration. But then you understand time of the restoration as tabernacling, but you have to have the layer of Gentiles where you explain the movements of kingdoms while during the time of the restoration period. For some people it's brain-racking because they don't understand. But then the angel said, then those who are wise will understand. So who is wise? The person is speaking because the person understands? No, because of the Messiah. Give credit to whom it belongs. So let's make this extremely clear. There are only first, second, and third kingdoms of saying so. namely then the Soviet Union, you have Africa, and you have China. Not particularly in order. But these are the kingdoms then with the saying so. Later we understand when the first son has relationship with the second son, comes the Yishmealites. Then comes the promise given to Ibrahim as far as the first son is concerned. Then shalt thou have a control of these movements of cargo via then petrol or then crude. And then comes the organization of the second son, tabernacling until the starting of the autumn feast. So the outline is given.